Okay, in this video, we're going to understand how the unit circle works. The first thing to know, the horizontal x-axis is the cos axis, and the vertical y-axis is the sine axis. So, and we have 4 quadrants. We have the first quadrant, second, third, and fourth. Now, we need to know how sine and cos behave in the first and second quadrant. The first thing that you actually need to know is that in the first quadrant, sine and cos are both positives. And you will also need to remember the value of cos and sine for some angles, some specific angles that I put here for the 30, for the 45, and for the 60. Usually, it's common in math to use actually in terms of radians, like pi over 6 is the 30, pi over 4 is the 45, and pi over 3 is the 60, instead of 60, 30s, and things like that. In physics, you deal more with 60, angle 40, and so on. But in math, you deal more with pi over something, pi over 5, pi over 2, and so on. So these are the main angles that you actually need to remember. For example, here, First, let's see, in the first quadrant, as I said, sine and cos are both positives. Why? For the 60, if I project here for any point, the 2 points are in the positive x and the positive y. Even for the 40, if you do, you still get like positive x and positive y. So that means the first quadrant, for any angle, you get positive sine and positive cos. Cos of 30 is square root of 3 over 2, and sine of 30 is 1 over 2. And cos of 45 is the same as sine of 45, is square root of 2 over 2 and square root of 2 over 2. And then you get of the pi over 3, which is cos of 60 is 1 over 2, and sine of 60 is square root of 3 over 2. So pretty much you just need to know these ones. You just need to remember this one. You don't need to worry about the other angles. I'm going to show you how you can actually use the unit circle to remember the values of the other angles. Also, just to bring, here is the 90 pi over 2. For the 90, you have cos is 0 and sine is 1 because you just have a point in the y-axis. And for cos of 0, you get cos is 1, sine is 0, because you just have a point in the x-axis. The sine of 10 is just the division of the sine of the sine divided by the sine of the cos. For example, for the first quadrant, sine is positive, cos is positive. That means 10 is just positive with positive is just positive. Okay, now let's get the values of the other angles. So after this, we have 120 here. So I just connect. Sometimes you don't even have to know what is the value in terms of degrees. You just connect like that. And the angle here is gonna be pi over 3. You have to put a number here. That number is going to be the number at the bottom minus 1, so 2. That's how I do it to remember. Just remember, when you go across, you just put, okay, the same pi over 3. Then you take the number of the bottom, the denominator, subtract 1, and then put that on top. This, if you have to convert it in degrees, will give you 120 degrees. But sometimes you don't really have to know, whether it is how much is in degree. And same here for the 45. If I go across, the angle is pi over 4. Same, 4 minus 1 gives you 3. So I'm going to put 3 here. And the same for the pi over 6. What I do, well, just pi over 6. And 6 minus 1 gives you 5. I'm going to put 5 here. And here is the 80 is pi. We know that is pi here. So I also need to know what are the values of these angles here. So they actually are going to have the same values as the angle that they had in the first quadrant. You just need to change the sign. So how we find this here. This angle is related to pi over 3. So I still have the same values. Like that. Now I need to check the sign. Here, if I project for cos, it's on the negative side. So that means cos is negative. If I project for sine, gives me the positive. So sine is still positive. So even for this point also, if you project it, cos is going to be all of them is going to be negative cos. So in the second quadrant, cos is negative and sine is positive. If you go for tan, sine is positive, cos is negative. Negative positive gives you negative. And the values here, they are still the same. Square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. But cos is negative. And here is square root of 3 over 2, and you have 1 over 2 is negative. So that's how you find them. Now, here, how do you find the angles this side? So for here, I have to come like this. This is connected to one angle here, the pi over 6, and the 45 is connected to one angle here, and the pi over 3 is connected to another angle here. So how do I find this angle? For the pi over 6, I still have pi over 6. So what I do, instead of subtract 1, I add 1. So I have 7. Like that. For the 45, I still have pi over 4. I add 1 to 5 to 4 gives me 5. And for pi over 3, it's still pi over 3. Then I add 1 to 3 gives me 4. And here is the 3 pi over 2, the 170 degrees. Values are still connected with the one that you had in the first quadrant. So you just need to know those in the first quadrant. Here I just play with signs. So I'm gonna have this one here is connected with the pi over 3. So I have 1 over 2 and I have over 2. And the second one is connected with square root of 2 over 2 and then square root of 2 over 2. And if this one is connected with, I have square root of 3 over 2 and 1 over 2, like that. Now here for this point, if I project for the cos, it's in the negative side. And if I project for the sine, it hits in a negative y. So both of them are negatives. If I do the same here, they hit in the negative side. So both of them are negative. Even for this one also, both of them are negatives, like that. So you see here in the third quadrant, sine and cos, all of them are negatives. So for the tan, negative with negative gives you positive. Like that. So the angles here, for me, I think they're less important because we don't use it in math very often. But in order to find them, I'm gonna give just the most important one because you can just do 2 pi minus the angle here to get those. But you can actually what you can do is also like most of the time in math we connect them with the one in the first quadrant, like this. Yeah, we connect them like this. And we put negative sign like minus pi over 3, minus pi over 4, and minus pi over 6. We use the negatives instead of use the actual angle. If you don't use the actual angle, it's fine. Just do 2 pi minus, for example, this pi over 3 is going to give you the angle, the actual one. But most of the time, we just use, minus pi over 3. Yeah, instead of using that angle. Yeah, we just use that. And the value, they are still connected the same. We just play with sign. I'm going to just do one. We just play with sign. Here, for this point, if you project, y is negative, cos is positive. So cos remains positive, but y, we get negative. The same, so cos is positive, y is negative. And if you do tan, negative positive gives you negative. So you see, first quadrant, all of the angle, cos, tan, and sine are all positive. In the second quadrant, then the sign for cos is negative for the sign is positive. So tan gives you negative. In the third, you have equal signs. You have both sine and cos negative. Tan gives you positive. And then in the fourth quadrant, you have cos positive, sine negative. Then tan gives you also negative. So that's how you actually remember the values of the angles in the unit circle.